and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some topical insights, and I focus on both natal and relationship astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to hear more content from me, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Please check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. Thank you. So today's video is going to be in continuation with the Arudha Lagna through sign series. I know you have been waiting for this one, at least some of you. And namely, it's going to be on Capricorn Arudha Lagna. Now, once again, as usual, if you don't know what Arudha Lagna is, I remind you that it is not the same as the Lagna of the natal chart or the Ascendant, as it is called in tropical astrology. But rather it is a calculation based on the Ascendant and the Ascendant ruler. And if you want to find out how to calculate it, check out the video description. I will leave a link there to a video I made a while ago. In fact, a couple of videos. And the first video is going to be a very concise description of Arudha Lagna and how to calculate it. So please go ahead and watch that to see if this video applies to you. So let's get straight into it. So, first house in Capricorn, first house of the Arudha Lagna, or the Arudha Lagna itself in Capricorn. So this shows your first impression, the first impression that people get of you. So you come across as a person who is serious, mature, rather stern, dignified, maybe wiser than your age. But also a little bit melancholic, maybe a little bit pessimistic. You might come across as a person that doesn't easily loosen up and just relax. You might come across as a person who is not particularly interested in having fun, but rather is all business and all about work and discipline. And you're also perceived as a person who is quite ambitious and willing to climb the social ladder and to do whatever it takes to get there. And yeah, so you could easily succeed in matters to do with the state, in politics especially, because Saturn and Sun are both the planets that are most connected to politics. I'm gonna get into that at some point if I have time. But basically, yes, so if your ascendant is ruled like Saturn, like Capricorn Arudha Lagna, for instance, then you could easily get into politics because you look like someone who can succeed in this profession, so people are more readily going to trust you, particularly when it comes to, let's say, left-leaning policies. So, and also you could easily succeed in anything to do with just being formal, like being a spokesperson, but also not someone who is like too showy, or not someone like entertainer, for instance, but someone who is in the limelight as a representative of an organization. Those are positions that could suit you well. So you could probably easily climb the social ladder in almost any organization that has to do with just getting real results, like a corporate ladder, like again in politics, or matters of the state, or just any kind of system where there is already a defined order of things, and there is a predetermined ladder to climb, basically. Okay, second house from the Arudha Lagna will fall in Aquarius. This shows that when you speak, the way that you speak, the way you talk, makes people think that you are rather eccentric, sometimes strange. They may not know what to think of you exactly. You might come across as unpredictable when you speak. Someone who can easily just, basically switch from black to white, from night to day. So yeah, unpredictable in one way or another. You also might come across as a little bit foreign when you talk. So like you might sound like someone who is just different from your peers or the society that you live in, or from the status quo. There's just something unusual about you and individualistic. And you can also kind of give off an energy of kind of a mad scientist, or someone who's, you could also come across as someone who is a little bit of a mad scientist, but also someone who is kind of new agey, or like someone who is into including things like astrology, tarot, anything that would fall under new age stuff. So sort of spiritual, but also capable of materialistic success at the same time. The third house from the Arudha Lagna will fall in Pisces, which shows that you are seen as generally a good person, meaning that, well, the third house shows how people perceive the way you go about achieving your goals, the way you go about getting what you want, your overall intentions. And because Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, and Pisces is really one of the most benign energies out there, so it comes across as really sweet and innocent and all that. So people who have this Capricorn Arudha Lagna, people will tend to see you as someone who does things for the greater good, which again can easily help you in a profession like politics, because you tend to come across as rather trustworthy, often to other people's destruction, as you will see when I get to the examples. But yeah, so people will think of you, will tend to trust you, will tend to think that you're a fair play kind of person when it comes to getting what you want, going after your goals. You are seen as someone, who's fair play, who is wise, who will always choose, the common denominators, or the, how should I put it, the win-win situation for everybody in any situation, so they also tend to perceive you as someone who's very faith-based in your actions. So whether you are seen as religious or not, it depends. Well, if you speak about religion, you might come across as religious, obviously. But in any case, even if you are not a religious person, somehow people see you as someone who acts on someone who is very fervently passionate about his or her beliefs. Whichever those beliefs may be. It doesn't have to be religion. And so that you are seen as someone who acts out of beliefs and faith. Like, that's your main basis of motivation. The fourth from Arudha Lagna falls in Aries. This shows that when people look at you, they tend to imagine that your family of origin was quite tempestuous. Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is the planet that rules warfare. So you might be seen as someone who comes from a family that maybe was very intent on masculine values, traditional masculine values, like being assertive, aggressive, competitive. You may have been pushed to be athletic, or to be getting into sports. This is the impression that people will have of your family of origin. Very male dominated, so it may seem like your family was more about the male energy, maybe not particularly soft and loving, but rather focused on just pushing you to be the best of the best, and maybe a little bit pioneering as well, but definitely tempestuous and possibly even violent to some extent, or like conducive to violence. Like, that's the general impression. But on the other hand, you can also be thought of as coming from a family that was connected to any kind of defense professions, like the military, the police force, even things like engineering. So anything that is Mars dominated. Everything that has to do with the physical body, or mechanical engineering, or stuff like that. Things that are physical and tough, basically. Or also entrepreneurship, because that's about pushing yourself forward. Okay, so the fifth house from the Arudha Lagna will fall in Taurus. This means that when it comes to your hobbies and how you enjoy yourself, meaning your leisure time, you are seen as someone who is very artistic. You are seen as someone who enjoys things like just everything that you can enjoy through the five senses, like hedonistic pursuits. This could be like everything from good food, good eating, a peaceful life, to going to the opera, going to movies, enjoying art in all its forms. You might be seen as a person who is also a good cook or enjoys cooking. Music, obviously. So all of the art forms, basically. You are seen as someone who really enjoys artistic pursuits in your free time. And at the same time, this shows how your children will be perceived, and it shows that your children are going to be perceived to be artistic and feminine and gentle, down to earth, not complicated. Basically a kind of like salt of the earth, what you see is what you get kind of person. And also just beautiful, like they're going to be seen as good looking. Okay, the 6th house from the Arudha Lagna will fall in Gemini, which shows that when it comes to dealing with the enemies, the competition, and your subordinates and your pets as well, you are seen, but especially when it comes to competition and enemies, you are seen as a person who uses intelligence and your power of communication to deal with them. So this is your strong point. This is your arsenal, basically. Like you are using you could be someone who is seen as great at debates. Again, all of these things kind of point to someone who might do well in politics, but not only. There are a lot of positions, a lot of professions that you can be successful in. But you are basically seen as someone who can, take out your opponents through arguments, and using the power of communication, whether it's verbal or otherwise. And, okay, let's see, checking the notes. 7th house from Arudha Lagna will fall in Cancer, which shows that people will perceive your partner to be even a little bit maternal, or someone who's nurturing, feminine, gentle, sensitive, imaginative, moody, and kind of a homebody as well. Someone who just enjoys spending a lot of time at home and in cozy environments. And it also shows that the people that will oppose you directly, or like to your face, or open enemies, will be mothers and mother figures. This could be your own mother, or it could be mother figures in general, I guess. Obviously, all of these can be modified based on planetary aspects, but this is a general description. Okay, 8th from Arudha Lagna falls in Leo, which shows that your health is generally perceived to be robust. You're generally seen as healthy, with your weaknesses being perceived to be connected to the cardiovascular system or the heart. It also tends to show that generally it is not difficult for you to get loans. So yeah, especially you can easily get loans for any kind of like artistic pursuit, or for any kind of educational purpose, or for your children, or for children in general. So any activities to do with children. The 9th house from the Arudha Lagna falls in Virgo. This shows that the people that will support you the most in life are going to be younger people, and also people that are connected to health service, connected to medical science, or any kind of profession that has to do with animals, working with animals. So veterinary doctors, or I don't know, could be a lot of things. Animal shelter workers. So this is particularly good to understand, again, if you are looking to start a business and you're looking for which target audience you should focus your services or your products on. You might want to go for some of the categories that are indicated by your 9th house from the Arudha Lagna, because these are the people that are going to help you the most. So these are people who will support you. And let's see. And also shows like gurus, right? So people who will guide you, mentors, can also be part of these people. So people who are doctors or involved in the medical profession, etc., etc. 10th house from the Arudha Lagna falls in Libra. This shows that your position in society is connected to arts somehow. Like, people can, not just arts, but anything to do with diplomacy, negotiations, any kind of professions that involve a lot of one-on-one interactions, a lot of partnerships. So you are perceived to be someone who relies on partnerships to succeed professionally, to succeed in society, basically. You could also, again, easily be perceived as a person who can make it in the arts, any form of arts, especially fine arts, like, I don't know, writing or music, but like musical instruments and stuff. Yeah, so more refined forms of art. And also, you're going to be seen as someone who is greatly helped by feminine energy to succeed professionally or to succeed with regards to your social status. So you could be seen as someone who, like, your power comes from women, or like women give you a lot of power, or your profession, like your social karma somehow is connected to women. You know, and not just any women, but particularly young women or women who are not mothers. And, yeah. And also people who are involved in artistic pursuits or anything to do with hedonistic pursuits. So that could be anything like fabric business, jewelry, music, food, anything that you can enjoy through the five senses, and everything that has to do with the finer things in life is ruled by Venus. So yeah, those are all things that you could be perceived to be successful in, or these are fields that it's going to be easy for you to gain success in them and support in them. Okay, the 11th from the Arudha Lagna falls in Scorpio, which shows that when it comes to your friend circle and your elder siblings, you are seen as a person who is friends with a lot of powerful people. I'm laughing because I'm already thinking about the examples. So you're seen as someone who has like a lot of powerful people in your social circle and friends in high places, that kind of thing. You are also perceived to be someone who is friends with people who have a lot of secretive jobs. Like, this could be like secret intelligence, this could be spies, could be detectives, could be psychologists. So can also be, but to a lesser extent nowadays, could be professions connected to extraction of natural resources like minerals and oil and all that stuff. You're also perceived as potentially having connections to the underworld, or like, I don't mean underworld like hell, but you know what I'm saying, like, I don't know if underworld is the right word, but like things like gangs and drugs and, you know, like gangsters, like mafia, etc., all this stuff. You could even be perceived as someone who might potentially entertain these kinds of connections. Like, people can easily see you capable of having connections with these kinds of people. And also occultists of all kind. So here we see kind of like the dark side of occultists, like people who are into cursing, into demons, into like, and also astrology and tarot and everything that is kind of new age, but more like the dark side of new age stuff. Yeah, so that's what I can think. And let me see. The 12th from the Arudha Lagna will fall in Sagittarius, which shows that on the one hand, your hidden enemies are people who are religious institutions. They could also be foreigners to some extent, anybody from a foreign land. They could also be people involved with teaching professions. So any kind of teachers could be your secret enemies, like your professors, your teachers, your even mentors, like people that some of your mentors might turn against you and that kind of thing. Now remember that secret enemies means people that are not going to tell you directly that they are against you, but they might secretly work against you, basically. And so yeah, so they could be professors, anybody involved in higher education, religious institutions, religious leaders, religious people in general. Could also be anybody involved with publishing houses, etc. Anything to do with philosophy, anything with the higher learning stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And aside from that, though, on a positive note, Jupiter ruling the 12th house from the Arudha Lagna shows that if you are to have disputes, or if your contract is going to end, for instance, at work, or any kind of contract that you might have signed, you are more likely to get compensation. Like, you are very likely to get compensations for that. Like, for instance, let's say your contract ends and you get a few salaries compensation when your contract ends, that kind of thing. This might be especially true if there are benefics transiting through the sign of Sagittarius at that time. Okay, and especially if you also have the Mahadashas connected to Jupiter, Mahadasha or Antardasha. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much the general description. So let me give you the list of famous people that I found with this Arudha Lagna. So some of the famous people, right? Margaret Thatcher, Lana del Rey, Sigmund Freud, Brad Pitt, Eva Peron, Adolf Hitler, Angela Merkel. I so laughed at this. Like, so basically, if you live in Germany and you have this and you have this Arudha Lagna, you might have high chances of becoming chancellor. Pope John Paul II, Matthew McConaughey, Lucy Lawless, Charlie Chaplin. Okay, so, and I took two examples to break down more in detail, and that's Adolf Hitler and Lana del Rey, right? I figured I should take a contrasting pair. Here we have the artist and the failed artist, to put it nicely. So first of all, Lana del Rey, so in her natal chart, she has first house in Libra, so her ascendant, not her Arudha Lagna, her ascendant is in Libra. The ruler of the Arudha Lagna is in the 7th house, which puts her in the exception category of how to calculate the Arudha Lagna. So her ascendant her Arudha Lagna is in Capricorn, and she has Jupiter in the Arudha Lagna. And she has Moon in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna. First of all, this shows me a person that can easily gain a lot of popularity. Okay, even though, funny enough, 7th house from the Arudha also shows opposition. It shows people who will oppose you. Like, for her, this could show, like, her mother or mother figures. But it also shows popularity, like planets that you have in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna. Show popularity. Now, I'm not going to go very in detail here. I haven't looked at her entire chart. And by the way, if you're interested in having detailed astro profiles for any of these people, please leave comments in the comment section. Okay, so yeah, basically having Moon in the Arudha Lagna means that it will give her popularity in the 7th from the Arudha, and also Jupiter having benefics in the 1st 7th axis of the Arudha Lagna gives you popularity generally, especially when you're going through the dashas or antardashas of those planets. And also what I noticed is that she has Venus Rahu conjunct in the 4th house from the Arudha Lagna, aspecting the 10th house from the Arudha Lagna, right? So by opposition, her Venus-Rahu conjunction is opposite the 10th house from the Arudha Lagna, which is the house of social status and her image in the world. And she also has Pluto-Saturn conjunct in the 10th house from the Arudha Lagna, which basically really explains her social image as being this kind of dark, glam, sort of, songstress or siren. Because so she has Pluto and Saturn. A lot of her music is like dark and about death and suicide and suffering and all this stuff, which really kind of plays out. And she also has Venus conjunct Rahu. Rahu, by the way, shows media, and Venus conjunct Rahu is an aspect that blows feminine energy out of proportion, so makes a person appear very feminine, or possibly can choose to make themselves appear very feminine. And her Venus Rahu is also looking at the 10th house, so to me this paints a pretty accurate picture of her image. And aside from that, Venus conjunct Rahu, I think, is in Bharani, which is a very dark, feminine sort of energy. I'm going to be talking more about it in the Nakshatra series. So, then the 6th house from the Arudha Lagna, this was also interesting, is in Gemini and is occupied by Sun, Mars, and Mercury, all conjunct in Gemini. So this shows that the way she deals with competition, first of all, this also shows that she is fiercely competitive, or she is at least perceived to be fiercely competitive, because she has Sun and Mars there, especially Mars. So this shows a lot of competitive energy and drive and the ability to basically overtake your competition through sheer force, basically. And she also has all of these planets conjunct with Mercury, which is the planet of communication, in Gemini, which is the sign of communication. And when you think about it, I mean, the way that she overtook the competition in her field is by writing music, which is something that you would expect to be ruled by Mercury and Gemini, because at the end of the day, she composes her music. And she writes the lyrics and everything, right? So, and she also uses speech to deal with competition. That's what it shows. The 7th house, right, like I said, is occupied by the moon. Right, so this is what I could see just from her Arudha Lagna, which I think tells quite a lot about her popularity and her image in the world. And let's get to Adolf Hitler. Okay, so when it comes to Adolf Hitler, what I can see is, first of all, so he's also a Libra ascendant, just like Lana del Rey. And the funny thing is, so both of them, when it comes to this ascendant situation, they have pretty similar energies up until the point where Lana del Rey has her ascendant ruler, namely Venus conjunct Rahu, and which only magnifies, the Venusian qualities of Venus, and it's also in the same nakshatras as Hitler. So Hitler also had his ruler, his ascendant ruler, as Venus, and also in Bharani, except it was conjunct Mars and widely conjunct the Sun and Mercury. So there are different planetary aspects there influencing the ascendant ruler, but they both fall into the same exception of having their ascendant ruler in the 7th house, which, if you have watched the video that I made about Arudha Lagna and how to calculate it, means that the Arudha Lagna becomes the 4th house sign, which is Capricorn, right? So what I can say about Hitler's chart is that first of all, the thing that stands out to me is the fact that the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna doesn't have any malefics. The ascendant doesn't have any malefics. The 7th from the Arudha does have a malefic planet, namely Saturn. But if you've watched the videos that I made about Arudha Lagna so far, you will know that the basic feeling or image that people get of you comes from the 1st, the 7th, and the 3rd house. Actually, the 1st and the 3rd house first and foremost. The 7th shows more about like how your public image is perceived, the kind of people that oppose you, your popularity, and blah blah blah. So planets in the 1st and the 7th house axis from the Arudha Lagna show potential fame planets, what you're going to be famous for, but you have to be going through the Mahadasha and Antardashas of those planets for them to activate. And the 3rd house really shows how people will perceive your intentions. And when it comes to Hitler, the fact that his 3rd house is pretty much entirely influenced by benefics, namely Jupiter and Moon, kind of shows that nobody really knew how crazy he actually was. Now, I mean, you also have Rahu opposite Jupiter and Moon, but that's a slight malefic bend. You know, definitely speaks for people seeing him as a manipulative character, possibly. But obviously they were not aware enough of how dangerous of a person he was, because the third house is mostly benefics. His ascendant, although it is ruled by a malefic, it is not, like, does not contain malefics, so there's no, like, particular malefic influence on his image, really. Aside from that, the fourth house from the Arudha Lagna, that's where he has most of his planets. So he has Venus conjunct Mars, conjunct Sun, conjunct Mercury in the fourth, from the Arudha Lagna, and that's opposite the 10th from the Arudha Lagna, which is Libra, which shows that all of those planets cast their image on his social status and his career house. And so it basically explains why people saw him as warmongering on the one hand, but on the other hand also pretty charismatic, because Sun is leadership abilities. And the funny thing is that also the Sun is, well, in my humble opinion, I think the Sun rules far right, or like right wing kind of political views. Not necessarily far right. Obviously in his case they were far right, because there were a lot of things in his chart that suggested that he was pretty extreme. But the Sun basically rules royalty, right? So, and the funny thing to me is that he has the Sun aspecting his 10th house from the Arudha Lagna, which also happens to be his ascendant in his natal chart. So clearly people saw him as a leader, and they saw him as a kind of an embodiment of a traditional kind of, almost kind of like a king. Well, he was a dictator basically eventually, but yeah, saw him as a person who is a traditional leader in the traditional sense, as almost alike to a king basically. And whereas the 7th from the Arudha Lagna falls in Cancer, and there you have Saturn, which shows people who will actively oppose him, which shows socialistic views basically. Saturn, in my humble opinion, is connected to democracy and socialism and communism on the darker side. I mean, communism on the darker side. And I think that, you know, it pretty paints a picture of who his enemies were, his opposition, and where he gained his support from. The 9th from the Arudha Lagna falls in Virgo, and Mercury again is conjunct the Sun. So he got his support from people who were in view, who were, I think, right-wing in view. In my humble opinion now, don't get the idea that anybody who has a strong Sun is going to be right-wing or a bigot or anything like that. But basically the way that I see it is like Sun connects to the traditional view of, you know, monarchies and, you know, a ruling class and all this stuff. So they're more about maintaining a class division. Whereas Saturn is, you know, the underprivileged, or the beggars, quote unquote, people who are disadvantaged in society and who push for things that are more towards socialism and communism. Basically, everybody's like pushing to maintain their side of the story. But in his case, it really shows like his ultimate demise came from, you know, the Soviets basically. And also another thing that I noticed in his chart is that he has Rahu in the 6th from the Arudha Lagna, which shows that not just Rahu in the 6th, but in Gemini, shows that he used deception to tackle his competition and his enemies. And that was certainly clear for him. I mean, if you actually read a little bit about him, he actually mastered the art of deception. He would actually train to portray himself in the most manipulative way possible so that he could impress the ignorant masses, you know, as he thought of them. And he also used a lot of deception. I mean, he would sign agreements that he didn't did an honor. He played, he played favorites with certain parties, but while the whole time basically hoping to basically get rid of them in the end so that he could make way for his Aryan race. He played buddies with the Italians as long as they were useful, played buddies with the Russians until they were no longer useful, etc., etc. Made a lot of promises he didn't keep. So he was basically a master at deception and manipulation, and that's really how he was able to achieve the level of power that he did. And let me think. Like another thing that I noticed also with respect to his third house from the Arudha situation, is that it shows circumstances of death, which is really funny to me because I cannot say 100% if he really died the way that people know that he died, because you may have heard these theories that he didn't actually commit suicide, that he was eventually managed to run away to South America, and that he actually passed away many decades after the war. Those were like theories that were passed around, but there was never any proof that actually happened. There were just like stories and pieces of evidence or supposed sightings of him and blah blah blah. But the funny thing to me is that normally I would look to the third from the Arudha to see the circumstances of death and whether the story being told publicly is also shown by the chart. But in this case, I can't really tell because the 12th house from the Arudha Lagna is both a house that shows foreign lands. So it could be that he died in a foreign land, right? That he eventually traveled not just foreign lands, but like literally different continents. But on the other hand, it also shows places of confinement. And according to the official version, he died in a bunker of suicide, right? And I'm not even sure exactly what did he do. Like he drank poison or he shot himself. I think they shot themselves. Anyway, and so his chart can show either of those variations because he has the ruler of the third from the Arudha in the 12th house in conjunct moon. Conjunct moon could be shown that he died near a body of water, but it can also show that he died like close to a female figure or close to his wife, because he did die with his wife, and since the moon also rules the 7th from the Arudha Lagna in his case. And not only that, but the moon-Jupiter conjunction is opposite Rahu. And I've often seen Rahu, not often, like literally I think all of the charts, I haven't looked at that many, so I can't say that I've seen thousands of charts, but the charts that I have looked at that were of people who committed suicide, all of them had Rahu involved with the third house from the Arudha Lagna. Now, I don't know why this is exactly, so it's not, I wouldn't say that if you have Rahu you're going to commit suicide or something, but, so it's not true that every time when Rahu shows up it's always a suicide, but like every suicide that I've seen has some Rahu influence, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's because Rahu shows a sudden death. So obviously when it comes to suicide it is a sudden thing usually, unless there are, well, exceptions, like, I don't know, when a person is sick for a long time and they decide to take their life. But it's like, mostly it's a sudden situation, right? People just suddenly decide that this is it, they've had it, and they commit suicide. And it can also, Rahu can also show death by technology, so it can show weapons, or any kind of like mechanism or mechanical device actually being involved with the actual death. So I don't know, but the thing that if he was supposedly shot himself, because I think that's what he did, or did he take poison? I don't know, I should have like read this, but I'm pretty sure that he shot himself. And if the official version was that he shot himself, I don't see that, because in order to see gunshots and fire related to the cause of death, you have to have sun connected to the third house from the Arudha. At least in every single case that I've seen where there was like fire or gunshots, it was something connected to the sun, and I don't see the sun here being connected to the third house ruler. Now, of course, all of this provided that his time of birth was actually correct, which presumably it was. I mean, I'm supposing that they got some official documents to get it But this is what I can see anyway. So I don't know, the question is still open, because in other cases where, you know, the cause of death was debated, I was able to see, I would say, with like 80% accuracy whether the cause of death that was given officially was truly the real cause of death or whether it was fabricated. Like, but in this case, it's kind of like still hanging in the air. So maybe he died abroad, maybe he really killed himself the way that the official story went. I don't know. If anybody has any ideas on that, please comment in the comment section. And this has been it. Again, if you have enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And please comment in the comment section with any kind of feedback, any ideas for future videos, or if you want to have a video on a particular famous person's astro profile, please comment in the comment section. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Please check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. So, thank you.